Welcome to the 6th Annual Kimmy Duong Foundation Scholarship Award Ceremony. Please rise for the national anthems. Please remain standing for the national anthem of the Republic of Vietnam. Of silence to honor and remember our ancestors who laid the foundation for our success, to honor and remember the men and women in uniform who defended and sacrificed their life for our freedom. The moment of silence begins. The moment of silence completed. Please be seated. Dẫu mai đi mọi phương trời, những lời thầy dạy đời đời khắc ghi. Tôi xin mượn hai câu thơ trên để làm lời khuyên cho các em có mặt trong buổi lễ nhận học bổng hôm nay. Ở đây, người thầy tôi muốn nói là cô Kimmy Dương. Và những lời cô dạy, những lời cô nhắc nhở cho từng em trong những buổi phỏng vấn là Kimmy Dương Foundation đã tạo thêm cơ hội cho các em trong con đường học vấn. Nên cô hy vọng các em sẽ thay cô và Foundation tiếp tục giúp người, giúp đời và khi ra vào xã hội và giúp đỡ cho thế hệ sau. There's a Vietnamese saying, whenever you be in the future, the teacher teachings are eternities. The teacher here, I'm referred to Mrs. Kimmy Duong, and the teachings are her wisdom of providing educational opportunities and humanitarian support for Vietnamese and American communities. Influenced by her beauty background, Mrs. Kimmy Duong has always been a concern for helping others. So throughout her life, Mrs. Duong has generously donated to charitable causes such as Vietnamese Association for the Handicapped, scholarship for high school students, housing for the poor, cataract surgery for the poor, and medical care for the poor. Since coming to the United States, Mrs. Duong has also contributed to the Code of Conduct, scholarship, veterans, the University of Maryland, Montgomery College, and Northern Virginia Community College scholarship funds, and numerous Vietnamese American student scholarships. In 2015, Mrs. Duong formed the Kimmy Duong Foundation to support all this work in a more structured and sustainable way. She welcomes all those who share her passion for helping others to contribute to the Kimmy Duong Foundations. Mrs. Duong joined Pragmatics Inc. in 1987, followed a successful 25 years career at IBM. She currently serves as the Pragmatic Vice Chairperson and Chief Financial Officer. Mrs. Duong earned a bachelor's degree in Business Administration from the University of Saigon. In 2008, Mrs. Duong was selected as one of the profile in Diversity Journal Women Worth Watching. In May 2023, Mrs. Duong was awarded the Mason Medal, the highest award from George Mason University. Recently, she is selected to be the recipient of the Glenn Martin Medal from the James Clark School of Engineering from the University of Maryland, College Park, and the Honorary AA from Montgomery County College. Ladies and gentlemen, the founder and president of Kimmy Duong Foundation, Ms. Kimmy Duong.
Kính chào các anh chị, các cháu. Hôm nay Kimmy Duong rất là hân hạnh được đón chào các anh chị và các cháu đến chung vui với mấy em. Sau đây tôi xin vài lời bằng tiếng Anh. Dear honor guest, friends and scholarship recipients, it is an honor for me to talk to you about the achievement of our student and Kimmy Duong Foundation. And dear recipient, today we are celebrating your success in winning the Nguyen and Kimmy Duong scholarship. Our goal is expanding to California now to help more students and more schools. As you all know, each application is reviewed by at least 3 judges. Our selection not only based upon your academic record, but we also look into your candidate ability and desire to support the community and their love for America. The moving banner from the Kimmy Duong Foundation website remind you to give back and paying forward. Giving back and pay forward is not just a nice thing to do, but that is our responsibility. In May, we went to Bangkok, Thailand, to visit Vietnamese refugees. We saw their hardship, and it touched our heart. Each family has only a room, 12 by 13, only 180 square feet. It's just smaller than your kitchen. That is their bedroom, family room, dining room, kitchen, and bathroom. As you all know, how hot it is in Bangkok. Of course, they cannot afford the air conditioner. They cannot even afford the fan, electric fan. They had, because electricity, it was so expensive there, so what they do is they turn it off. At night, when it's really hot and their children can't sleep, that's where they turn it on a little bit for the children to sleep. We, Kimmy Duong Foundation, plan to participate in a new program that the government new program is called Welcome Call. That is where we try to bring the Vietnamese, qualified Vietnamese refugees there to come here to the US. So we are looking forward to that. As you know, our scholarship program has grown a lot since 2018. That is the first year we start. Our first year, 2018, we awarded only 12 scholarships. Now, the 6th year, we awarded here and 105 scholarships, and California 23 scholarships. Total is 128. We hope our scholarship will continue to grow so that we can help more students and more schools. Today you have a chance to Today you have a chance to listen to Congressman Gary Connolly and also listen to Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Melissa Brown, our keynote speaker, a role model for young America. Listening to her, you will recognize that you can reach your goal if you put your mind and heart to it. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my team who are working so hard day and night, review so many applications, interview many candidates to select the best recipient. I will name it a long list. I have 32 judges now. At the beginning, we have only 5. It's easier to read, but now it's a long list. Mrs. Nile, Mr. Nguyen, Mr. Trinh Phan, Dr. Da Nguyen, Mr. Nguyen, Dr. Sarah Bui, Dr. Vinh Nguyen, Dr. Yu Bui, Dr. Yu Thi Nguyen, Dr. Quỳnh Nguyen, Mr. Mai Yo Cam, Ms. Linda Weiss, Dr. Sung Nguyen, Dr. Kang Nguyen, Dr. Ngọc Hà Nguyen, Dr. Phương Anh Đặng Vũ, Dr. Dennis Nguyen, Mr. Phương Nhật Lâm, Mr. Bauer, Dr. Thục Nhi Nguyen, Mr. Jacka Gardner, Mr. David Nguyen, Ms. Nico Võ, Ms. Diệu Quyên Nguyễn Khoa, Mr. Đạt Võ, Dr. Duy Dương Trần, Dr. Nghĩa Công Trương, Dr. Thủy Vi Bùi, Ms. Anna Phan, Mr. Chánh Nguyễn, and Dr. Hà Lệ. And just like the scholarship program grow, I need more judges. So if you have any people qualified, please introduce it to us. I cannot say enough how to show my appreciation to the support I get for this program from the individual and corporate who believe and support us. I know for sure that we would not be here without you. Thank you very much. Now I would like to introduce to you Mr. Nguyen. He is our director of the foundation.
Hey, now I'm told her. Ladies and gentlemen, scholarship recipients, today I stand before you, the recipient, to congratulate your receiving of the Kimmy Duong Foundation Scholarship. The scholarship has the power to transform life. They recognize not only academic excellence, but also determination, passion, and pursuit knowledge, and your contribution to the community. As you embark on your own academic journey, remember that education is not just about grades or degrees. It is about discovering your true passion and use that passion to create something meaningful. I encourage you to embrace your uniqueness. The world needs your fresh perspective, your ideas. Don't be afraid to think differently, to challenge the norm, and to follow your intuition. Trust yourself and your ability for you to have the power to change the world. In addition, do not afraid to lean in the community for support. Thank you, and may your future be filled with endless possibility.
I'm going to use the steps too now. I hope you can see. Next up, we have a guest speaker, Congressman Gerald Connolly. Congressman Connolly is serving the 8 terms at the U.S. House of Representatives from the 11th District of Virginia, that include Fairfax County and the city of Fairfax in Virginia. Prior to his election to Congress, he served 14 years in the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, including 5 years as a chairman. Throughout his career, protecting and growing Northern Virginia economy has been his top priority. In Congress, he has played a key role in securing federal funding for transportation improvement in the Northern Virginia, that including the completion of Fairfax County Parkway, widening the Prince William County Parkway, and provide ongoing support for the rail to Dallas, and securing the annual federal commitment of $150 million for the regional metro system. Please welcome Congressman Gerald Connolly.
I don't need to stand. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. And congratulations to my friend Kimmy Duong and Long Nguyen for this incredible scholarship program. And congratulations to the 105 who were with us in receiving that award. I want to talk about the story of immigration and education in America. In 1920, a young girl, 18 years old, emigrated from Northern Ireland to the United States. Being a Catholic girl in Protestant Northern Ireland in 1920 was not a good place to be. And so our family shipped her off with a cousin to explore opportunities in America. She didn't even have an 8th grade education. She had no money. What little money, pocket money she was given by her family to get in the ship to come to the United States was lost when she was robbed on board. She came to the United States with almost no skill. She sewed. She took in laundry from rich people. 2 generations later, her grandson has a master's from Harvard and stands before you as a United States Congressman. That's the power of immigration in America in terms of believing in future. The enabling power of freedom. The power of self-determination and opportunity, and an assertion that once I take that oath, or once I'm born here, I'm as American as anybody else. And education's the key. Education is the key to power. Economic power, social power, cultural power, political power. And it leads to incredible things. Here in Fairfax, I represent the highest education level in America, which, by the way, as a member of Congress, sometimes is a blessing and sometimes a curse. Because when I speak to a group, you know, probably the world's expert is in that room. And when they say, well, maybe you can come speak to us Wednesday night, if I say, well, we might have votes, only in this district do people say, no, we checked, there are no votes. But I'd much rather have an educated electorate than not. And what did that lead to in our community? The lowest crime rate in America, the highest high school graduation rate in America, the lowest dropout rate in America, the highest rate of going on to higher education in America, the 3rd highest wealth in America in terms of median household income. And by the way, we did all of that as we diversified. We went from a place that was 85% white to a place that is now a minority community. And we did it through education. That was the key. I, every year, am #1 out of 435 in Congress in appointing young people to the military academies. And you know why? Because of education. Our schools graduate highly qualified young people who are in high demand by our military academies. And I'm very proud of that. So winning the scholarship is not only a real benefit, but it's a symbolic benefit of where our future takes us. And we have to keep our eye on the ball. Investing in education is investing in our future. When you look at what makes a country great, there are 3 legs on the stool. Education investment, research and development education investment, and infrastructure investment. If you don't make those 3 sets of investments, I guarantee you, you're going to lose out in global competition. China is making all of those investments in spades. We cannot afford to fall back. We've got to make these investments, and each one of these investments has a huge return on it, as I told you about Fairfax. Are those education investments in Fairfax worth it? In terms of our tax dollars, you bet. I'd much rather live here than many other places. Because there's payoff, there's a return on the investment. Each one of you who is receiving a scholarship today will have a return on that investment. And I hope you'll follow, in some ways, wherever life takes you, the model that Nguyen and Kimmy, Duong have set for you. Give back. Help somebody else. Rise them up. Give them a helping hand so they can reach their potential, just like someone helped you today to reach yours. And if you do, you'll be a happier person, and America will be a better country. Congratulations.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we have the honor to have Ms. Melissa Brown as a keynote speaker for our Kimmy Duong Foundation's award ceremony. Ms. Melissa Brown is a Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of State with the responsibility for the Office of Mainland Southeast Asia Affairs and the Office of Maritime Southeast Asia Affairs. From 2019-2021, Ms. Brown served as the Chargé d'Affaires ad interim at the U.S. Mission of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Jakarta, Indonesia, where she led the unprecedented expansion of U.S. agreement with ASEAN, as well as the effort to mobilize ASEAN to resolve the political crisis in Burma. Previously, Ms. Brown was the counselor for the economic and political affairs at the U.S. Embassy Singapore from 2016-2019, where she also served as the acting Deputy Chief of Mission for 1 year and oversaw the execution of the historic 2018 Singapore Summit between the U.S. and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. A Southeast Asia expert with a strong trade policy background, Ms. Brown was previously assigned to Jakarta, Indonesia as a trade and investment U.S. chief at the U.S. Embassy. In Washington, she also detailed in the Office of U.S. Trade Representative and served on the U.S. State Department Vietnam Desk. Her earlier overseas diplomatic assignment includes Port Louis, Mauritius, and Bangkok, and Thailand. Before joining the Foreign Service, Ms. Brown was the corporate legal assistant, a graduate from Georgetown University Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Service. She speaks fluently Indonesian, French, and have also studied Khmer, Cambodian, and Hungarian. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Melissa Brown.
Who thinks I need the stool? I think I'm okay. Thank you so much. Whenever I hear my bio read out, I feel like I'm 900 years old. But I guess in some ways, what I have to share with you today is very much along the themes of finding your passion, keeping that sense of curiosity, and then also using that determination for a sense of purpose. So, good morning again. Hello to everybody. I'm certainly thrilled to honor you today with celebrating these scholarship recipients for their hard work and their well-deserved scholarships. Where did Kimmy go? She's probably running around organizing the show. A big thank you for having me here today. Your energy is really an inspiration, I think, to all of us, as well as your story, of course. I admire the commitment that Ms. Kimmy has to these students, to supporting education at Washington area schools, as well as just that real dedication to giving back to the community. I think, again, all of us feel very inspired by her. To the congressman who had to run out, it was certainly an honor to share the stage with him. I will say it's a little hard to follow a congressman in terms of public speaking. He's got a little more practice than all of us combined. But I do want to thank him for his support for the State Department as well as for the federal service more broadly. It's really important to have champions like him on the Hill. Above all, I want to thank all the parents and all the family members that are here. I think the students will agree with me that without your support, your encouragement, no one would be here today. The students couldn't have achieved what they have. By way of introduction, you heard my bio, but I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Southeast Asia at the State Department. You are all probably wondering what that really means. So the long and short of it is, day in and day out, I lead the team that oversees U.S. policy towards Southeast Asia, meaning we partner with the U.S. embassies in those 11 countries to figure out how can we move U.S. interests forward? How can we protect U.S. interests, whether it comes to trade or just American citizens? But also, how can we move the ball forward? What kind of interests do we have that are shared with those countries, and how can we advance them? One thing that I was asked to cover today is, how did I end up where I am? And so, it's funny, my staff wrote here, share your story of why you joined the Foreign Service. So most people usually expect me to say I felt this great call and pull to doing something bigger than myself. But I'll tell you, it was a little bit different. When I graduated from Georgetown, I really wanted to be a corporate lawyer. And my dad said, before you go commit to law school, make sure that you know what you're getting into. And so he gave me 1 month's rent, and I moved to New York City with no job, and I became a paralegal. I became a corporate legal assistant. I found a job pretty quickly, but I also found very quickly that that's not where my heart was. A couple months in, I thought, this is not the job for me. So thank you to my late father for saving me significant loans for law school that I didn't take out. But I had been an intern at an embassy abroad when I was a student, and I had taken the Foreign Service exam right before September 11th. About a year later, in early 2022, they called me up and said, do you want to go overseas? So again, rather than the call to service, I felt a call to adventure. I thought, they're going to pay me to move to a foreign country to have a job and just figure out where I want to be. So perhaps an unconventional story, but my call to service came as to why I stayed in the Foreign Service. It's not maybe why I signed up in the first place, but I have to say I got pulled into that sense of doing something so much bigger than myself, to leading teams, to working with teams, to figuring out the mystery of other cultures and languages, but also feeling like I was representing the United States in all that I did, and representing the United States in all that we are. And what that means is it's very much that story that the Congressman shared with us, that sense of opportunity, but also that sense of purpose. The fact that you can come to the United States and transform yourself, that we are stronger because of our diversity, and because of our interests are not always clear. But that complexity of the United States in many ways adds to the adventure, and why it is that finding out how to advance our interests can be so complex and complicated, and in some ways really rewarding, because I get to be permanently curious and use my passion to figure out how to move things forward. So I'm actually freshly back from Vietnam. I came back on Thursday afternoon, which made it very easy for me to wake up this morning. So I was in Vietnam, I was in the Philippines, I was in Indonesia. I went with the Secretary of State to Indonesia for our participation in the ASEAN-related ministerials. What does that mean? That means that the ministers from across Southeast Asia got together, held meetings, and then they invited important partners like the United States to join them and talk about key issues. That means everything from pandemic preparedness to the South China Sea and maritime security. It also means how to advance our trade and investment relationship. It also means education and people-to-people ties. My favorite part of the Secretary's program was participating in the Young Southeast Asia Leaders Initiative event, which is a network of young people across Southeast Asia that the United States has been supporting for about 10 years now. And just, it's the same energy. Whenever I talk to young people, I think those of us who are no longer young people are just absolutely inspired by all that you've achieved, and the passion and the energy for continuing to make the world a better place. So for me, again, I work day in and day out, specifically on Vietnam, thinking about where Vietnam wants to head with its future, where the United States' interests lie, and then figuring out the puzzle of where our interests collide, and then persuading, cajoling, convincing the Vietnamese government how to make changes and continue to evolve so that our futures can be linked up. Some of that's easy, stuff like digital transformation, I think we can all agree, but some of it's difficult. I think you can imagine talking about human rights and about religious freedom with the Vietnamese government can be tricky. You have to balance being respectful and constructive with also being honest and true to U.S. values. So these are certainly big tasks. It's an important key time to be a diplomat, not that there ever wasn't one, but the fact that the Indo-Pacific region is so much a priority for President Biden, for Secretary Blinken, and he always talks about how ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, how it's at the very heart of his Indo-Pacific strategy. And you can see that with him headed out to Jakarta, as I was with him last week, but also with the engagements the president had. Many of you saw that President Marcos from the Philippines was here just recently. So that's also my team who puts together the program and what we're trying to achieve. And again, what we're trying to bring them along in terms of, for instance, transformation to green energy, infrastructure development, but also the tough issues. Again, human rights is just one of them. But I can assure you that that's something that we stay true to throughout. The congressman also mentioned the big challenge of China, and I'll just note that one really important thing for us at the State Department, and in particular for someone like me working on Southeast Asia, is to make sure that we have an affirmative vision. My key is always to be for more things than you're against. And so when we talk to our Southeast Asian partners, we don't jump right into, this is why you should be worried about China, here's what we're doing. Because then it'll make them feel like they're second in line, that we're really there to talk about the China challenge. And of course, it looms large. It's key to our discussions. But I think in general, wherever you're going to head with your future careers, it's always key to make whoever you're talking to feel like they're the center of your attention. You're thinking of them first, and that you have more of an affirmative vision versus pushing back purely against other issues. You also know that many of you, because of the fact that we do have so many Vietnamese Americans here, my statistic is 2.2 million. I don't know if it sounds about right to me, but of course many folks here in the Northern Virginia area. I think that just ties the future of Vietnam and the United States even more closely together. The reality is, being a diplomat, sometimes we talk about governments working together. Governments aren't really things, right? Governments are made up of people, and they're people like me. But I will also note that when I talk about the United States, I'm not always just talking about the United States government. I'm really talking about the United States and everything that's represented in this room and beyond. It's individual people that make up the United States. It's civil society organizations. It's U.S. companies. It's educational organizations. It's much bigger than a government and a government. So I can assure you that when I say I try to advance U.S. interests, it's thinking of what is needed for the future of all those that we have here today. But I guess reflecting back, listening to the various speakers, they've urged you to stay passionate and committed and dedicated, and we all know you have worked so hard, because otherwise you wouldn't be here in this room and you wouldn't be receiving scholarships. What I can assure you is you may not always know where your passion lies, and that's why I was convinced I was going to be a corporate lawyer, and look where I am now. What I can tell you is each and every day I choose to remain a diplomat. This is not, this is not something on autopilot. This is because I feel strongly that I'm achieving things that are bigger than something I could do alone, that I'm achieving things that are good for the future of the United States, and that I still have the passion and the drive to have fun with what I'm doing. And so when I think back to when I was a student, I'll just tell you, you might think there's a perfect path. There probably isn't one. Be open to all these possibilities and try to find what your passion is. So again, the call to public service, I think passing it forward, taking care of others as you were given a helping hand yourself is absolutely a key message. But it comes in many, many different flavors, and there are many different ways that you can go about it. I do think being a diplomat shares a lot with many other successful career paths, in that often listening and empathy are really important. And as I mentioned earlier, that commitment that we have as diplomats is also the commitment that you've had to your scholarship, and hopefully to what you have in your future careers, whether it be in public service or elsewhere. But of course, we all have a lot of responsibility, and I think that doesn't just relate to the students here, that relates to each and every one of us. We all have the responsibility to use whatever power or platform we have to move things forward, to achieve good. And I think seeking out opportunities to advance things, but also to have honest conversations and to have dialogue. We often joke as diplomats that one of our superpowers is in fact not talking at you, but it's actually listening to you. and understanding the perspective of what country I'm dealing with the officials. Because if you truly listen, you can have a sense of where your interests truly align. So I think what I'll end with here today is, again, I don't have, people are always asking me for career advice, and perhaps I'm not someone your parents want you to talk to, because I often say, you should seek out advice from so many different sources, and then you should put aside the advice that doesn't work for you. Because if you're just following other people's advice, you're gonna end up without the passion and without that dedication and without the drive to continue to do what you're doing. So in some ways, I think find people that certainly inspire you, be proud of what you can accomplish, make sure that you listen to others, and that you remain curious, because that'll keep you on your toes and keep you signing up each and every day for what you've decided is right for you. But again, I just want to commend everyone in the room for their role in moving these scholarships forward, whether you be the students who did the hard work, the parents who encouraged it, but also it's really amazing to see this panel of judges and other support for this program. I think we're all pretty proud of what these students have achieved here today. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Melissa Brown. Should I expect in the future your resume will include Vietnamese language in it?
It's a hard one. It's a hard one.
We are now moving to the certificate award presentations. Dr. Nguyen will have a few words on Kimmy Duong Foundation Scholarship Program and present the award to the recipient of Montgomery County College, the University of Maryland at College Park, Baltimore County, and at Baltimore. Dr. Nguyen completed her undergraduate study at the University of Virginia. She then pursued her medical education at the Johns Hopkins University and also finished her internships and residency training at the Johns Hopkins Hospital.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Phương Lam, for your introduction. Dear honored guests, parents, and scholarship recipients, as you know, the Kimmy Duong Foundation Scholarship Program was established in the year 2018. Over the past 6 years, the program has grown tremendously. We now have spread it beyond the DMV area and have now spread it in operation in the state of California. This year, our scholarship fund has risen to $261,000, allow us to be able to award 15 diamond scholarships at $3,000 each, and 103 gold scholarships at $2,000 each, and 10 silver scholarships at $1,000 each. And we will begin with the recipient from Montgomery College.
Ms. Joy Matthews at Montgomery College. Ms. Matthews is a Vice President of Development and Alumni Relations and the Executive Director of the Montgomery College Foundation, Montgomery College.
Thank you so much. This is an event that I look forward to every year. It is so thoughtfully and personally organized, and it's always inspiring. So I'm really happy to join you today. I first came in 2019 to this event for the second year, and it was the first time that I had the privilege and the pleasure of meeting Mrs. Kimmy Duong and hearing her journey and her commitment to education and to the community. I also just want to bring greetings from our president, Dr. Jermaine F. Williams. He's traveling internationally today, but he sends his best as well. And I just, again, congratulate all of you, and I know that you are seriously and gratefully receiving these awards. Congratulations.
Okay, we will now begin with a presentation from Montgomery College. We have Gold Scholar Ms. Samia Fahin. She's a sophomore in biological sciences. She said, the more my dreams stumble, the more I become passionate about them. Her scholarship sponsored by Conjero and will be presented by Mr. Duong and Mrs. Diệu Tiên Công. Just want to remind, please hold your applause until the end of school, please. Next, we have next from Montgomery College again, we have Gold Scholar Mr. Louis Lujan. He's a junior in biomedical engineering. He said, don't live as your endless year ahead of you. That eclipses you. While you are alive and able, be good. His scholarship sponsored by Thanh Thúy Inc. and will be presented by Mr. Thanh Nguyen. Next, we have Gold Scholar Miss Iris Nguyen. She's a freshman in biochemistry. She's using a quote by Amy Marsh from Little Women. I'm not afraid of storm, for I'm learning how to sail my ship. Her scholarship is also sponsored by Thanh Thúy Inc. and will also be presented by Mr. Thanh Nguyen. That concludes the presentation for the recipient from Montgomery College. And now we will begin to continue with the presentation for University of Maryland.
Dr. Zinab Karaki is a seasoned higher education professional. She's the Associate Dean for Culture and Community and the Clinical Professor of Information System in the Department of Operation and Information Technology at the Smith School of Business, University of Maryland, College Park. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Karaki.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to take much time. I'm going to ditto what my colleague has said here. Many thanks to the organizers, to the foundation, to Mrs. Kimmy Duong. Young. I was trying, to get it the Vietnamese, the Vietnamese way. My utmost admiration to the students who are here, because we're here because of them. As I always tell my students in school, our students are the raison d'être, or the reason of existence. This is why we exist. So congratulations. I want to also acknowledge my colleagues from all universities, from the University of Maryland, from Montgomery College, from UVA, from Nova, from, am I missing? Yeah, I'm missing other universities, so please excuse me. I want to give that chance and the center space, the center place to my students here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karaki. Now we will begin with the presentation for University of Maryland. From University of Maryland, we have Gold Scholar Amrutha Ali Billy. She's a freshman in neuroscience. She said, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. Her scholarship is sponsored by Dr. and Mrs. Kim Nguyen and family and will be presented by Dr. Kim Nguyen. Next, we have Gold Scholar Ms. E. Như Từ. She's a junior in technology and information design. She said, embrace uncertainty. Some of the most beautiful chapters in our life won't have a title until much later. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Kemhausen and will be presented by Mr. Roy Kemhausen. Next, we have Gold Scholar Ms. Elizabeth Barsky. She's a senior in bioengineering. She's using a quote by Dr. Benjamin Spock. Trust yourself, you know more than you think you do. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Mrs. Yi Hong Sun. Next, we have Gold Scholar Ms. Nora Bui. She's a junior in neuroscience. She's using a quote by Mr. Nelson Mandela. The great glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen of Teletron, who unfortunately cannot be here with us today, so her scholarship will be presented by Ms. Kimmy Young. Next, we have Gold Scholar Ms. Emanuela Nicole Nwisi. She is senior in neuroscience and French language and literature. She said, one child, one teacher, one book. One pen can change the world. Again, her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen of Teletron and would be presented by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Mr. James Miller. He's a sophomore in business management. He's using a quote by Cody Johnson. If you have a dream, chase it, because your dream won't chase you back. His scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, Teletron, and will be presented by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Diamond Scholar, Mr. Benjamin Nguyen. He's a junior in mechanical engineering. He's using a quote by Master Uwe. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why we call it present. His scholarship is sponsored also by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen of Teletron and presented by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have another Diamond Scholar, Mr. Damon Nguyen, who's a freshman in biochemistry. He said, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. His scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen of Teletron and presented by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Ms. Hannah Nguyen. She's a senior in finance. She's using a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. Do what you can with what you have where you are. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen of Teletron and presented by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. We have another Gold Scholar, Ms. Tammy Nguyen. She's a freshman in biology. She said, the flower that blooms in adversity is the most rare and beautiful of all. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, Teletron, and presented by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have another Gold Scholar, Ms. Thu An Trung. She's a junior in civil engineering. She said, I question everything, and yet I'm open to everything. And I don't have immovable belief. My values shift and grow with my experiences. And as my context changes, so does what I believe. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, Teletron, and presented by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Ms. Lin Nguyen. She's a senior in architectural technology. She said, always be ready to adjust, recalibrate, and stay after it to become better somehow. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Wu Work and Family and will be presented also by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. We have Gold Scholar, Mr. Justin Pham. He's a sophomore in computer science. He's using the Vietnamese proverb, gần mực thì đen, gần đèn thì sáng. The meaning is, you influenced by people around you. Surrounded by light, your life will be enlightened. Surrounded by evil, you will face moments of darkness. And his scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Wu Work and Family also. Okay. We have Gold Scholars, Miss Sydney Quintana. She's a freshman in biology. She's using a quote by Henry David Thoreau. Go confidently in the direction of your dream, live the life you have imagined. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Dak Vo, who unfortunately cannot be here with us today, so be presented by Ms. Kimmy Yoon. We have Gold Scholar, Ms. An Trung. She's a junior in behavioral and community health. She's using a quote by Audrey Hepburn. You have two hands, one to help yourself, the second to help others. Her scholarship is sponsored by Conjero and would be presented by Mr. Duong. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Mr. Danny Chung. He's a freshman in computer science. He said, our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. His scholarship is sponsored by Conjero and presented by Mr. Duong. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Ms. Tam An Trung. She's a freshman in cell biology and genetics. She said, intelligence without wisdom is nothing more than stupidity that looks smart. Her scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and would be presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Mr. Yin Trung. He's a freshman in mechanical engineering. He said, your time is limited, so don't waste living in someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the result of other people's thinking. His scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have another Gold Scholar, Mr. Wilbur Villeda. He's a junior in finance. He's using a quote by President John F. Kennedy. Ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. His scholarship is sponsored by Dr. Long and Ms. Kimmy Nguyen and presented by Dr. Long and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Ms. Angela Vo. She's a freshman in accounting. She says, trying one thing after another and trying to learn from everything that I try. That's the only way. The illusion that's a quick answer leads to burnout. Her scholarship sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. Next, we have Miss Victoria Vaugh. She's a sophomore in letters and sciences. She's using a quote by Lucille Ball. I rather regret the things I've done than regret the things I haven't done. Her scholarship sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. Next, we have another gold scholar, Miss Veena Vaugh. She's a junior in computer science. Even though you fed up, you got to keep your head up. Her scholarship sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. We have gold scholar, Mr. Ethan Lapp. He's a junior in biological sciences. He said, "Cái khó, lock at home. In times of trouble, wise solution will appear." His scholarship sponsored by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. Next, we have another gold scholar, Mr. Vincent Pham. He's a junior in computer engineering. He said, "Plan for what is difficult, what is easy. Do what is great, what is small." His scholarship sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. Next, we have another gold scholar, Mr. Brian Nguyen, senior in computer science. If you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else. His scholarship sponsored by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu and also presented by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. Last but not least, we have the last recipient from University of Maryland, Silver Scholar, Miss Angeline Pham. She's a junior in computer science. If you have good thoughts, they will shine out your face like sunbeams, and you always look lovely. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. And that's the conclusion to the presentation to the recipient from University of Maryland. We will now continue with the presentation to the award recipient from UMB and UMBC.
Dr. Ken Barron is the Assistant Vice Provost for Academic Advising and Student Success at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County.
On behalf of UMBC, I thank all of you for the opportunity to participate in this forum today and wish all of the scholarship recipients tremendous success in all of your future endeavors. Your families, communities, the Kimmy Jung Foundation, and future alma maters are investing in you. Please pay us all back by graduating and inspiring others to follow in your footsteps. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Dr. Barron. We have from UMB, Gold Scholar Miss Kimmy Nguyen. She's a senior in health physics education and exercise science. She said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. From UMBC, we have Silver Scholar Miss Marilyn Nguyen. She's a sophomore in information system. She said, "Effort makes you. You will regret it someday if you don't do your best now. Don't think it's too late to keep working on it. It takes time. There's nothing that gets worse due to practicing, so practice." Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Miss Kimmy Yu. And that will conclude the presentation for UMB and UMBC.
Dr. Gil Thi Nguyen completed her undergraduate study at Dartmouth College and continued on with her medical education at Dartmouth Medical School. She completed her residency training at the University of Virginia Health System. She currently practices as an internal medicine physician for the Mid-Atlantic Permanente Medical Group in Woodbridge, Virginia.
It is my honor to announce the recipients for VCU, Virginia Tech, and UVA, and we will begin with the recipients for VCU.
Dr. Chet Krause proudly served Virginia Well University as Assistant Vice President for the University Development, currently celebrating his 10th year of service of the university.
Good morning. On behalf of Virginia Commonwealth University President Dr. Michael Rao, our faculty, staff, and most importantly our students who are the beneficiaries of the generous philanthropy made possible by the Kimmy Duong Foundation, I'm here this morning to express our gratitude and appreciation. Thank you so much for the privilege of being here today and representing one of America's great public research universities, which promises access to everyone to better our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krause. Our first recipient from VCU is Gold Scholar Ms. Daphne Estrella. She is a senior majoring in fashion merchandising. Her quote is, "Fear is inevitable. I have to accept that, but I cannot allow it to paralyze me." Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Mr. Chi Yung and Dr. Sun Chang Wing. Our next recipient is Diamond Scholar Ms. Serena Goyle. Her quote, she is a freshman in biology. Her quote is, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Mr. Jan Wei and Dr. Phương An Dang Vu. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Tina Nguyen. She is currently a sophomore majoring in chemistry. "Do what you can with what you have where you are," her quote by Theodore Roosevelt. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long and Mrs. Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation. Our next Gold Scholar is Ms. Hương Vân Pham, who's currently a senior majoring in psychology and sociology. She says, "Learning to stand in somebody else's shoes, to see through their eyes, that is how peace begins. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world." Her scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yung. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Mr. Can Pham, who is currently a junior majoring in biology. He says, "As one person, I cannot change the world, but I can change the world of one person." His scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yung. And our final recipient from VCU is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Diane Vu, who is currently a junior in biology. She says, "Fear kills more dreams than failure ever will." Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yung. And this concludes our VCU presentation. Next begins our scholarship presentation for recipients from Virginia Tech.
Dr. Keith Thompson joined Virginia Tech College of Engineering as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in July 2020. He is responsible for providing leadership and support in all areas related to faculty and the matriculations of undergraduate degree-seeking students, including academic planning and assessment, faculty hiring, development and support, enrollment management, curriculum development, and student services.
Good morning. Virginia Tech is grateful to be one of the institutions represented here today, and we are honored to have 14 Long Nguyen and Kimmy Duong scholarship recipients joining us this upcoming year in Blacksburg. The Long Nguyen and Kimmy Duong Scholarship not only increases access and affordability for the students attending each of the institutions represented here, but the scholarship also provides the opportunity for these students to join and form their own cohort at their respective institutions. This could be as simple as joining a familiar face in a dining facility, sitting next to them in a classroom, or having someone you know enjoy a movie on a Friday night. Regardless of which institution you are attending this fall, congratulations to all of the scholars who are here today.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Our first recipient from Virginia Tech is Gold Scholar Ms. Anna Nguyen, who's currently a senior majoring in human nutrition, foods, and exercise. She says, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." Her scholarship is sponsored by Conjero and presented by Mr. Duong. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Lin Pham, who's currently a junior majoring in computer science. She says, be the change you wish to see in the world. Her scholarship is also sponsored by Conjero and presented by Mr. Duong. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar, Mr. Bao Ho, who's currently a junior in computer science. He says, the harder I work, the luckier I get. His scholarship is sponsored by VATVonline and presented by Mr. Duong. Our next recipient is Silver Scholar, Mr. Ethan Nguyen, who's currently a freshman majoring in economics. His quote is by artist Baby Keem, third order of business, do good deeds and get good karma. His scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Bang Nguyen and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar, Ms. Alice Cao Dao, who's currently a freshman majoring in biology. She says, I was within and without, simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. Her scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. The next recipient is Gold Scholar, Mr. Han Do, who is currently a freshman majoring in computational modeling and data analysis. His quote comes from Bruce Lee, do not pray for an easy life, pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. His scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Ms. Nguyen Huang, who's a junior in computer science. She says, the limits of what we can do are still unknown. We are constantly challenging ourselves to try things that have never been done before. Her scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Mr. Anthony Mai, a freshman in computer engineering. His quote is from Roger Federer, there's no way around hard work, embrace it. His scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Mr. Long Nguyen, a junior majoring in chemistry. He says, around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. His scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and has presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have Gold Scholar, Mr. Colby Pham. He is a freshman majoring in computer engineering, and his quote is by Lao Tzu, do nothing is better than being busy doing nothing. His scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Next, we have our Diamond Scholar, Mr. Andrew Tran, who's currently a senior majoring in computer science. He says, today I will study, and tomorrow I can help the world. His scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. Our final recipient for Virginia Tech is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Caitlin Vu, who is currently a junior majoring in computer science. She says, believe in yourself and all that you are. Know that there is something inside you that is greater than any obstacle. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. And that concludes our Virginia Tech presentation. Please stand up. Our next scholarship presentation will be for the recipients from the University of Virginia.
Dr. Despina Luca study phase transition in condensed matter system. Dr. Luca is interested in understanding how the underlying interaction involving the spin, charge, and lattice degree of freedom lead to the emergent behavior and properties such as Polaron foundation, Taylor type distortion, spin, and charge density waves, superconductivity, and quantum spin liquid state. The most recent study of interest include topology, insulator, and semi-metal spintronic anti-ferromagnets.
Let me first thank the foundation for supporting dozens of UVA students over the years. This year, we are thrilled to know that 25 students will receive a scholarship from the Kimmy Duong Foundation. One of UVA's highest aspirations is to make education affordable and accessible. In fact, part of our strategic plan is to recruit and support bright, talented diverse students from regardless of their economic backgrounds. We thank the foundation for its support of students in this endeavor. With that, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to be here today, and I look forward to welcoming the UVA students on the stage, and also thank you for your support over the years, and I look forward to continuing support for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luther. Our first recipient from UVA is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Gabrielle Nguyen, who's currently a junior in nursing. She says the beauty in the world lies in the diversity of its people. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar, Ms. Isabella Le, who's currently a freshman majoring in neuroscience. Her quotes by Nelson Mandela: "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen. Our next recipient is Diamond Scholar, Ms. Vivian Cao Dao. She's currently a senior majoring in interdisciplinary neuroscience. She says, if there is a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, you must be the one to write it. A quote by Toni Morrison. Her scholarship is sponsored by Kaiser Permanente and presented by Ms. Myra Panagopoulos. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Kayleen Doe, who's currently a freshman majoring in computer science. Her quote is by Princess Diana: "Carry out a random act of kindness with no expectation of reward, safe in the knowledge that one day someone might do the same for you." Her scholarship is sponsored by Kaiser Permanente and presented by Ms. Myra Panagopoulos. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Ka Yao Chen, who is currently a junior majoring in foreign affairs. She says, you will never always be motivated, so you must learn to be disciplined. Her scholarship is also sponsored by Kaiser Permanente and presented by Ms. Myra Panagopoulos. Next is our Gold Scholar, Mr. Fong Le, who is currently a sophomore in computer science. He says, if you can dream it, you can do it. His scholarship is sponsored by Kaiser Permanente and presented by Ms. Myra Panagopoulos. Our next recipient is Diamond Scholar, Mr. Justin Nam Vinh, who's currently a junior majoring in biomedical engineering. His quote is by Theodore von Karman: "Scientists study the world as it is. Engineers create the world that never has been." His scholarship is sponsored by Mrs. Chuk Brown and will be presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon, or Mrs. Chuk Brown, I apologize. Our next recipient is also Diamond Scholar, Ms. Cherry Lin. She's a freshman studying computer science. Her quote is by Marie Curie: "Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less." Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen from Teletron and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Caroline Nguyen, who's currently a sophomore with an undeclared major. Her quote is, "They say the best blaze burns brightest when circumstances are at their worst." Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen by Teletron and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. And next we have our Diamond Scholar, Ms. Emily Nguyen, who's currently a junior in nursing. She says, "Do my best and work hard for the things I wish to accomplish." Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen of Teletron and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Haley Nguyen, who is currently a junior studying arts and sciences. "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel." Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen of Teletron and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Thuy V. Bui, who is currently a junior majoring in biomedical engineering. She says, "Tough times never last, but tough people do." Her scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is our Diamond Scholar, Mr. Kenneth Nguyen, who's currently a sophomore majoring in computer science. He says, "Breathing in, I see myself as space. Breathing out, I feel free." His scholarship is sponsored by the Long Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar, Mr. Andrew Nguyen, who is currently a sophomore majoring in computer science. He says, if you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else. His scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Diamond Scholar, Ms. Mackenzie Pham, who is currently a freshman with an undeclared major. She says, if I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. And our final recipient from UVA is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Melissa Vin. She's currently a freshman with the major in architecture. She says, our gifts count for nothing if we don't make the world a better place. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. And with that concludes our presentation for the recipients from the University of Virginia. Next, I would like to invite to the stage Dr. Phuong An Dak Vu to assist with the presentation for our next scholarship recipients.
Dr. Phuong An Dak Vu attended Briar Moore College, received medical degree from the Duke University School of Medicine, completed internship in internal medicine from Johns Hopkins Hospital, and residency in dermatology from the Hospital of University of Pennsylvania. Since 1992, she has been in private practice in dermatology in Northern Virginia.
Thank you. It is my honor to announce the scholarship presentation to the last two schools for today. Next will be the presentation to the recipients from Northern Virginia Community College.
Dr. Wu Chang is currently serving as the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Chief Academic Officer at Northern Virginia Community College. Dr. Chang has more than 25 years of experience in higher education. Please welcome Dr. Wu Chang.
And we have the 13 community colleges in Virginia participated with more than 200 students and faculty participated in the event. We are going to keep doing that every year. So actually, scholars, okay, you're very well recognized, but please look into these kind of experiential learning opportunities while you're at the colleges and universities. In closing, okay, my heartiest congratulations to the NOVA scholars who are recognized today, and also to all students who are awarded actually with this scholarship grant. And then thank you, Kimmy Yoon Foundation, for your support to Northern Virginia Community College. Thank you.
The first recipient for NOVA is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Janatul Ferdos. She says, we may not be responsible for the world that created our minds, but we can take responsibility for the mind with which we create our world. The scholarship is sponsored by Charity Group of Virginia and presented by Mr. Nguyen Le and Mrs. Hua Le. The next recipient is our Silver Scholar, Ms. Minh Thi Le. She's a sophomore in accounting. She says, difficulty at the beginning usually means ease at the end. The scholarship is sponsored by Charity Group of Virginia and presented by Mr. Nguyen Le and Mrs. Hua Le. And our last recipient is Gold Scholar, Ms. Ha Nguyen. She's a sophomore in computer sciences. She used the Vietnamese proverb, có công mài sắt, có ngày nên kim, roughly translated as practice makes perfect. The scholarship is sponsored by the Charity Group of Virginia and presented by Mr. Nguyen Le and Mrs. Hua Le. This concludes the presentation to the School of NOVA. Now we will continue with the presentation to the recipient from George Mason University.
George Mason University President Gregory Washington leads Virginia's largest and most diverse public university with the enrollment growing to nearly 40,000 students. Dr. Washington launched his Mason presidency in July 2020 with a series of initiatives to create new academics, and entrepreneur pathway for all Virginia. Please welcome the president of George Mason University, Dr. Gregory Washington.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. It looks like we're bringing up the end here. Well, first and foremost, to all of the students, and I mean all the students in the room, congratulations. This is indeed well-deserved. And we are here really to celebrate you all and to celebrate what you all are going to do. This is our down payment on the great things that we know that you are going to achieve once you leave here. So can we give the students a round of applause? But we're also here to celebrate something that is, in my opinion, even greater than that. And that is the belief in the power of education to transform lives, right? That's what Nguyen and Kimmy Duong have been doing. Supporting these students and positioning them for success in their future will transform their lives, and that transformation would lead to a transformation of the country. And I am just ecstatic to see this very large group of students here receive awards today. Congratulations to you all. Go Patriots.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. The first recipient for George Mason University is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Jocelyn Andrade, a senior majoring in psychology and criminology. She used a quote from Vincent van Gogh. If you hear a voice within you saying, "You are not a painter," then by all means paint, boy, and that voice will be silenced, but only by working. Her scholarship is sponsored by CRESET and presented by Mr. Lars Åkesson. The next recipient is our Gold Scholar, Mr. Caden Johnson, a freshman with undeclared major. He used quotes by Marsha P. Johnson. History isn't something you look back at and say it was inevitable. It happens because the people make decisions that are sometimes very impulsive and of the moment, but those moments are cumulative realities. The scholarship is sponsored by Dr. Nguyen in memory of Duong Kim Le and presented by Dr. Nguyen. Next recipient is Gold Scholar Mr. Hoang Le, a junior majoring in electrical engineering. He used a quote by Joseph Fourier. The profound study of nature is the most fertile source of mathematical discoveries. The scholarship is sponsored by Dr. Nguyen in memory of Duong Kim Le and presented by Dr. Nguyen. The next recipient is Diamond Scholar, Ms. Valerie Vu. She's a junior majoring in chemistry. She says, "I only want to ride the wind and walk the waves, slay the big whales of the eastern sea, clean up frontiers, and save the people from drowning. Why should I imitate others, bow my head, stoop over and be a slave? Why resign myself to menial housework?" The scholarship is sponsored by Mr. Chris and Mrs. Linda Klaas and presented by Mr. Chris and Mrs. Linda Klaas. The next recipient is our Silver Scholar, Ms. Ivy Dan, a freshman majoring in finance and business. She says, "If you don't challenge yourself, you don't know yourself." The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Mrs. Barbara Vogt. The next recipient is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Kim Mo, a junior in mathematics. She says, "My dream isn't to become the best. It is to be someone who I'm not ashamed to be." The scholarship is sponsored by Capital One and presented by Mr. Mike Monroe. The next is a Gold Scholar, Ms. Alisa Nguyen, a sophomore in nursing. She used quotes by Steve Jobs. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. The scholarship is sponsored by Capital One, presented by Mr. Mike Monroe. Next is our silver scholar, Mr. James Barr, a junior in film and video studies. He says, I'd rather try and fail than have never tried at all. The scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, Teletron, presented by Mrs. Kimmy Zoom. Next is our gold scholar, Ms. Betsy Baladares, a senior in social work. She says, she used a quote by Taraji P. Henson. I don't harp on the negative because if you do, then there's no progression. There's no forward movement. You got to always look on the bright side of things. The scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, Teletron, and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Zoom. Next is our gold scholar, Alexandra Merida, a senior in community health. She says that the only impossible journey is the one you never begin. The scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, Teletron, presented by Mrs. Kimmy Zoom. Next is our gold scholar, Alicia George, a senior in social work and minor in criminology. She used a quote by Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. The scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, Teletron, presented by Mrs. Kimmy Zoom. Next is our gold scholar, Connie Lum, a sophomore in engineering. She says, when I think of Vietnamese traditions, I do not think about the cuisine, the language, or the traditions. I think about the determination from others for the best of themselves, family, and community. The scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next is a gold scholar, Louis Kasahun, a sophomore in computer sciences. He used a quote by Jim Rohn. If you really want to do something, you find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. The scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next is our gold scholar, Young Taek Kim, a junior in computer sciences. He says, a ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. The scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next is Tao Le, a freshman in finance. She used a quote by Willie Nelson. Once you replace negative thoughts with positive ones, you'll start having positive results. The scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next is our gold scholar, Mr. Brian Nguyen, a sophomore in computer sciences. He says, we cannot solve today's problems with mentality that created them. The scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next is a gold scholar, Lillian Nguyen, a junior in computer sciences. She used a quote by Margaret Atwood. A voice is a human gift. It should be cherished and used to utter fully human speech as much as possible. Powerlessness and silence go together. The scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next, our gold scholar, Nha Uy Nguyen, a senior in bioengineering. She used a quote by Thomas Edison. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. Scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next is our gold scholar, Tai Hua Nguyen, a freshman in computer sciences. She used a quote by Oprah Winfrey. Passion is energy. Feel the power that comes from focusing on what excites you. The scholarship is sponsored by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next is our gold scholar, Vincent Nguyen, a senior in communications. He says, there's a reason that God gave us 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. It's so that you can listen and watch twice as much as you talk. Best of all, listening costs you nothing. Scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Zoom. Next is Phương Anh Quách, a gold scholar, a freshman with undeclared major. She used a Vietnamese proverb, bầu ơi thương lấy bí cùng, tuy rằng khác giống nhưng chung một dàng. briefly translated as people may be different but love them all as we are part of the sum. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. Next is our Gold Scholar Ensley Toad, a sophomore in biology. She says, what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. Next is the Gold Scholar Adriana Chen, a freshman in business. She says, I would rather die than live without passion. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. Next is our Gold Scholar Kimmy Chen, a sophomore in computer sciences. He used the quote by Colin Powell. There are no secrets to success. It is a result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. Next is our Silver Scholar, Nhi Yi Chen, a junior in geography. She used a quote by Albert Einstein. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. Next is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Kim Chuang, a senior in Business Management Information Systems. She used a quote by Mark Lee. The possibility of all those possibilities being possible is just another possibility that can possibly happen. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. Next is our Gold Scholar, Minh Quân Vo, a sophomore in Business Information Technology and Cybersecurity. He says, whoever is happy will make others happy too. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. Next is our Gold Scholar, Anthony Wu, a sophomore in mathematics. He says, education then, beyond all other devices of human origin, is the great equalizer of the conditions of man. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. Our next recipient is the Gold Scholar Ling Vu, a sophomore in nursing. She used a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. The scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. And finally, we have the last recipient for this morning. Our Diamond Scholar, Mr. Justin Zombron, a junior in business, and he used a quote by Frederick Douglass. If there's no struggle, there is no progress. And the scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy. And now, this is the conclusion of the scholarship presentation for this morning.
Wow, that's a big group of students. I think University of Maryland and Virginia had the most. I think George Mason did it all. So that concludes the scholarship presentation for all recipients. We now have the remark from the last recipient, the diamond recipient. Please welcome a student remark from Mr. Justin Zombron from George Mason University.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and my fellow scholarship recipients, my name is Justin Zombron, and I am humbled and honored to address you all this morning. My personal story and source of inspiration began 48 years ago, in the early morning hours of April 30th, 1975, when my family made a desperate escape on a boat out of Saigon. The communists gave chase and began firing on our vessel as news spread that Saigon had fallen. While the armored tanks tore through the gates and walls of the South Vietnamese seat of government, the communists sent troops to my family's home to arrest my great-grandfather, Colonel Nguyen. They went house to house, neighborhood by neighborhood, and only missed him by a few hours. He had been the director of the Central Intelligence Agency and the Director General of the National Police Force, appointed by the first democratically elected president of Vietnam, President Nguyen. After spending time at Langley, my great-grandfather built an intelligence network across Southeast Asia and was credited with saving the lives of thousands as war swept across Vietnam. I am a fifth-generation volunteer and activist. My grandmother, Nguyen, has devoted her life to aiding refugees, orphans, and advocating for democracy and human rights. My siblings and I were taught from a very early age to be of service to others. So we began volunteering when I was 10 years old. The work that we've done has come at a great cost to us. But freedom isn't free. It comes from the strength and sacrifices of those who come before us. I would like to thank the Kimmy Foundation, especially Mrs. Kimmy, who has provided unwavering support and encouragement to me over the past 2 years. The resources that this organization provides far exceed the tuition assistance. It includes mentorship and opportunities beyond the classroom. I hope to stay involved with the foundation as a future mentor, panelist, and sponsor. I would like to thank my family, especially my grandmother and parents who are in attendance today. They are the source of my strength and inspiration. Their resilience and uncompromising work ethic have propelled me to follow my dreams, which is why I will be graduating a full year early at the Honors College in George Mason University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Business, and will proceed directly to a joint JD and MBA program. And finally, I would like to leave my fellow scholarship recipients with the following message. What we do today matters. The actions we take today will shape the future. When the torch is passed to our generation, what legacy do we want to leave? How will we inspire future generations? Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Ladies and gentlemen, before we conclude the presentation ceremony today, please join us for the song Vietnam, Vietnam with our chorus.